I had just moved to Arizona, hoping to start over after the ashes of a life I once thought would never change. The desert was a strange, stubborn place, beautiful, in a way that resisted comfort. The sky seemed too open, like it had no walls, no roof. The sun baked everything in silence, and the nights came heavy with a kind of quiet that crept into your bones. The house I bought was too big for just me, though I told myself I liked the space. Room to breathe. Room to rebuild. I unpacked slowly, not because I had too much to sort through, but because facing it all at once felt like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. At first, I didn't mind the silence. But silence has a way of turning on you. It echoes your thoughts back at you, sometimes in a voice too loud to bear. I wasn't lonely, not at first, but I was unmoored. Like the ground under me hadn't quite settled yet. A friend I'd made through a community gardening group, a kind woman named Marta, noticed the way I lingered on certain words, the pauses in my stories, the way I rarely made eye contact when I said I was fine. "You need someone to help you settle in," she said one day. "The property's big. You shouldn't be doing everything yourself. I know someone. He's young but mature." That's how Liam came into my life. He was 17. Tall but not imposing. Quiet but not withdrawn. When he showed up that first morning, he carried himself like someone who knew how to walk lightly in the world. No dragging feet. No air of complaint. He just nodded when I introduced myself, called me then got to work like the job was already his. I remember watching him from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, as he swept up the porch without being asked. The way he moved, efficient, focused, made me wonder what had shaped him. He wasn't the kind of teenager who sulked or checked his phone every few minutes. There was something else in him. Something quieter. Like the desert. Stern, watchful, honest. He returned each morning just after sunrise. He cleaned, he repaired things I hadn't realized were broken, he organized the tools in the garage in a way that made more sense than my own system. After a few days, we started talking. Nothing major at first. Just the weather. The kind of music he liked. He had a calm voice, the kind that didn't beg for attention, but invited you to lean in. I liked that. Then one evening, I made too much pasta. Old habit, I never learned how to cook for one. I offered him a plate, half expecting him to say no. But he accepted with a slight shrug, sitting at the edge of the table like he was afraid to leave a footprint. That night, he told me his mother left when he was 10. No warning. No goodbye. Just vanished from the life of a boy who still remembered her scent. His dad was technically around, but absent in all the ways that mattered, drinking too much, talking too little. I listened more than I spoke that night. What he shared wasn't told for pity. He didn't flinch when he said it. Just facts. Like bricks stacked into a wall he'd long since learned to carry. And as he spoke, I began to feel something unexpected. Recognition. Because in his story, I saw echoes of my own. My divorce hadn't been a betrayal. Not a scandal. Just a slow collapse. The kind that starts with silence and ends with someone packing a bag on a rainy Tuesday without saying a word. Abandonment doesn't always look like someone walking out the door. Sometimes, it's just someone choosing not to walk back in. Days passed. Then weeks. Liam became a rhythm in the house I hadn't realized I needed. His presence was steady, like the creak of the floorboards in the morning or the sound of wind against the window panes. Not loud. Not demanding. Just there. And the strangest thing was, I began to look forward to his knock on the door each morning. I'd hear the gate click, then the soft shuffling of boots on gravel, and something in my chest would loosen. It wasn't joy or excitement. It was something quieter. A kind of calm I hadn't known I was missing. Then one afternoon, he stood in the doorway of the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, and asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Are you really happy here?" No smile. No preamble. Just that. A raw, unfiltered question dropped like a stone into a still pond. I didn't know how to answer. Because I hadn't asked myself that in a long time. That night, the question followed me like a shadow. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, thinking about the empty rooms. The unopened boxes labeled "Someday." The way I left the porch light on even though no one ever came. I told myself not to get too close. He was 17. A kid. But Liam didn't carry himself like one. He was careful. He cleaned up after himself. He never interrupted. He moved like someone who had lived too many lives for his age. And the way he looked at me, steady, unblinking. It was like he could see straight through to the parts of myself I kept hidden from everyone else. I started leaving things out for him. Small gestures, extra water bottles, snacks, tools I thought he might need, a book I finished and thought he'd like. He always noticed. Never said much. Just a nod. Sometimes a quiet, thanks. I never meant to let someone in again. Not like that. But Liam wasn't asking to be let in. He was just present. And maybe that's why it felt safe. Until the night everything changed. It was a quiet evening, the kind that painted the horizon in gold and set the shadows dancing long across the floor. Liam had stayed late helping me go through some old boxes in the attic, stuff I hadn't touched in years. We laughed at the absurd things I kept. Broken picture frames, a box of mismatched socks, a stack of birthday cards from people I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Dinner was an afterthought. Leftovers. Nothing special. He accepted the offer with his usual shrug. We ate in silence. No music. Just the sound of silverware and the slow ticking of the old kitchen clock. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. I want to stay here. Not just work. I mean, live here. I stopped mid-bite. At first, I thought I misheard him. When I asked him to repeat it, he didn't blink. I want you to adopt me, he said, his voice quiet but steady. Or just, let me stay. I don't belong anywhere else. I can't describe the weight of those words. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was something else entirely. A cry for grounding. A longing for a place that wouldn't disappear when the world tilted. His hands were clenched on the table. His shoulders tense. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't testing me. He was revealing something vulnerable and terrifying, hope. And the strangest part was my first instinct wasn't fear. It was yes. But I didn't say that. I told him I needed time. That something like this wasn't a dinner conversation. He didn't get angry. Just nodded. But I saw it, the small drop in his shoulders. He'd taken a risk, and he expected to be turned away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with every thought I'd been avoiding since I moved here. The old wounds. The solitude I pretended was strength. The possibility that I had let someone matter again, without even realizing it. I called the therapist I hadn't spoken to in months. Told her everything. She didn't judge. She just asked, "Are you sure you're seeing him for who he is, not for what you're missing?" That question haunted me. When Liam showed up the next day, I didn't dodge the conversation. I told him I didn't have the right answer. But I also told him this. I care. You matter. And as long as you're in my home, you'll never feel alone again. His eyes didn't light up. But they softened. And I knew we'd crossed a line. We weren't just worker and employer anymore. We were something else. Something fragile. Something real. The quiet between us. I had just moved to Arizona, hoping to start over after a painful divorce that had left my heart hollow and my spirit tired. The desert air was dry, the skies wide and unrelenting, and the house I moved into felt far too big for one person. At first, the silence was welcome. It wrapped around me like a blanket, a reprieve from the noise of a life that had unraveled. But eventually, that same silence began to echo back at me, louder, sharper, lonelier. A friend suggested I hire someone to help around the property. He's young, but mature, they said. Smart. Keeps to himself. Works hard. That's how Liam came into my life. He was 17. Quiet. Sharp-eyed. Polite in a way that didn't feel forced. The kind of teenager who doesn't sulk or vanish into a screen. He nodded when we first met and got straight to work, sorting the backyard, organizing the garage, fixing things I didn't even know were broken. I watched him from the kitchen window with a coffee cup in hand, quietly puzzled by how someone his age worked like a man twice his years. Over time, we started talking. At first, it was just the weather, or music, or the best brand of work gloves. But gradually, our conversations deepened. One evening, after I accidentally made too much pasta, I offered him dinner. He hesitated for a second and then accepted with a shrug. That night he told me his mother had left when he was 10. His father was still around, but only in the way shadows are, present but never warm. I listened more than I spoke. His story mirrored my own in quiet, aching ways. Abandonment has a way of wearing the same face on different people. Days became weeks. Liam settled into the rhythm of my home like he'd always been part of it. I didn't realize how much I'd started to expect his knock on the door each morning. He brought a presence that wasn't joyous or loud, just steady, a kind of calm I hadn't known I was missing. The house felt less empty with him in it. One afternoon, after finishing up in the garage, he leaned in the doorway and asked, "Are you really happy here?" Just like that. No context. No small talk. Just a question that hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I didn't know. That question stayed with me for days. It made me see things differently, the empty rooms, the untouched books, the way I left lights on longer than necessary. I kept telling myself to be cautious. He was young. This was temporary. But Liam didn't act like a child. He cleaned up after himself. He spoke with thoughtfulness. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't searching for approval. It was like he saw the walls I'd built and quietly accepted them. I began leaving out little things, a snack I thought he'd like, a book he might enjoy, a better flashlight for the garage. He always noticed. I never meant to let someone in again. Not so soon. Not like that. But Liam wasn't asking for anything. He was just there. And maybe that's why it felt safe. Then came the evening. Everything shifted. The sun was melting into the desert horizon, casting long shadows across the floor. Liam had stayed late to help me go through some old boxes I hadn't touched in years. I offered him dinner, just leftovers. He nodded and sat at the table like it was something we'd done 100 times before. We ate in silence. No music. Just the ticking of the clock. Then, with no warning, he said it. I want to stay here. Not just work here. I mean, live here. Like family. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. He wasn't emotional. His voice didn't shake. It sounded like something he'd practiced over and over. When I asked him to repeat it, he didn't hesitate. I want you to adopt me. Or at least let me stay, for good. I don't belong anywhere else. The weight of those words hit me in the chest. He wasn't being impulsive or dramatic. It wasn't about rebellion or convenience. It was a quiet, desperate plea for stability, from someone who'd never really had any. I looked at him, this young man who held his pain behind calm eyes and careful movements. His hands were clenched on the table. His voice had steadiness, but I could feel the fear beneath it. He wasn't just asking for shelter. He was handing me his whole heart. And what stunned me most was my instinct. I wanted to say yes. But I didn't. I told him I needed time. That decisions like this couldn't be made over dinner. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Like he expected that hesitation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the hallway for hours, passing closed doors and wondering how I'd let someone so deeply into my life without even realizing it. I wasn't looking to replace anyone. I wasn't looking to save anyone. But Liam had become something more than a helping hand. He was the steady presence I didn't know I needed. I called a therapist I hadn't spoken to in months and told her everything. She asked only one thing. Are you seeing him for who he really is, or for what you've been missing? It cut straight through me. When I saw Liam the next day, I didn't avoid the conversation. I told him I didn't have a clear answer yet, but I told him I cared. That he mattered. That as long as he was in my home, I would never let him feel like he was alone. His eyes didn't light up, but they softened. We had crossed a line. We weren't just homeowner and helper anymore. We were something more fragile. Something real. But real doesn't always mean permanent. Things changed after that. Not right away, but slowly. Like a door creaking closed, inch by inch. Liam stopped talking as much. The silences between us stopped feeling calm, they started feeling tense. He still showed up, still worked, but something was different. He was holding back, or hiding something. At first, I told myself it would pass. Maybe he felt rejected. Maybe I'd created too much hope, and then taken it away. I tried to keep things normal. But I started noticing small things. A few missing bills from my wallet. Tools not where I left them. Then one afternoon, I passed the guest room, and saw him snap his phone shut the second I came close. That wasn't like him. My gut twisted. And then came the night everything broke. I got home early and found the garage door half open. Inside, music blared. The air was thick with smoke and something sour. Liam stood with 3 older teens I'd never seen before. Bottles littered the ground. The second they saw me, the others scattered. But Liam didn't move. He just stood there, staring. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. Just looked at me like I was the one who crossed a line. "You let me in, then you push me out," he said quietly. "You act like you care. But only when it fits your schedule." I was stunned. His voice was low, calm, but every word cut sharp. He said I'd used him to patch my own loneliness. Made him feel wanted, then reminded him he didn't belong. I tried to explain that I was just trying to do the right thing, that I was scared, too, but he wasn't hearing it. This wasn't about the party. This was about all the silent confusion we never addressed. He said something I'll never forget. "You made me feel like I had a place. Then you reminded me I was just passing through." It felt like a blow to the chest. And in some painful way, he was right. I told him he needed to leave. That it wasn't safe anymore, for either of us. I arranged for him to stay with the family friend who had introduced us. He didn't argue. He just grabbed his bag and left. The silence that followed wasn't the peaceful kind. It was jagged, echoing his words over and over. Just passing through. Weeks turned into months. The house was quiet again, but not in a healing way. Just empty. I filled my time with errands, distractions, anything to keep from thinking about that night. But I did think about him. Often. I didn't try to contact him. I figured he needed the space as much as I did. But I kept revisiting our time together, trying to understand what it had meant. I saw so much of myself in Liam. My younger self. Desperate for connection, for someone who would just stay. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in small, careful handwriting. It was from Liam. He said he was sorry. Said he didn't know how to handle what he was feeling. He admitted he'd crossed lines. But one sentence stayed with me more than anything else. I just wanted to feel like I was enough for someone to stay. That broke me. I read it again and again, letting the weight of those words sink in. I wrote back. I told him he had always been enough. But that I wasn't the person to give him what he needed, not then, not in the way he deserved. I told him I forgave him. And I hoped he could forgive me too. He didn't write back. But weeks later, I heard from our mutual friend that he had enrolled in community college. Got a part-time job at a bookstore. Was doing okay. That was enough for me. It meant he was trying. It meant he hadn't let our story define the rest of his. I started therapy again. For real this time. I unpacked years of guilt, loneliness, and quiet grief. I looked closely at the roles I'd tried to fill, and the ones I had no right to. And somewhere along the way, I started to feel lighter. Not whole. Not healed. Just honest. Eventually, I met someone new. Not a sweeping romance. Not a rescue from solitude. Just someone kind. Someone steady. Someone who asked questions and waited for the answers. And I still think about Liam. Not with regret, but with clarity. We were two people with too much history and not enough guidance. We tried to fix wounds too deep to name. Sometimes love, whatever form it takes, isn't enough to keep two people in the same story. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let go before you damage what's left. And sometimes, the people who shake us the most don't stay. They just leave behind the lesson we never knew we needed. Thank you for watching interesting stories of Moody Tales. Kindly like, subscribe and share to get more interesting and educative stories. That's much better than this. Best wishes. From here, have a nice day.